I only had half a sandwich left, cold, soggy, barely edible. I offered it to a woman sitting near the dumpster behind the courthouse. She didn't thank me. She just stared with eyes that looked trained, not broken, not begging, trained. "You don't belong with them," she whispered. I thought she was high. 2 days later, she found me again, not in rags this time, but in a worn-out blazer holding a flash drive. "They're laundering money through your name," she said. "You want proof?" I didn't know it yet, but that half sandwich was the price for burning down my husband's empire. The Clark estate looked like something torn from a luxury magazine. Arched stone doorways, custom lighting, hand-picked Italian tiles. And yet every echo in its high-ceilinged halls reminded me I didn't belong here. Not really. I had moved in temporarily after losing both my startup and my son. The miscarriage broke me, but what followed felt worse. Silence. My husband Nathan handed me a glass of water and said, "It happens," before returning to a client call. That night, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, bleeding and alone. Now I wandered these halls like a ghost with good posture. I smiled when spoken to, offered to help with charity events, dinner prep, even bookkeeping for the Clark Family Foundation. But there was always a flicker in their eyes. Like I was a stray cat they let in during a storm, regretting it once the sun came back. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, perfected the art of gracious cruelty. "Madison, dear," she would say at brunch, "maybe it's best you don't stress about starting something right now. You're still recovering, aren't you?" Translation: unemployed, unmothered, unworthy. Nathan echoed her sentiments in kinder tones but firmer decisions. I once pitched a boutique data analytics service for small nonprofits. He smiled, nodded, then never forwarded my client emails. "I just don't want you overwhelmed, babe. Let's focus on healing." Healing. From what? My ambition? My independence? I found my sanctuary in the garage, a makeshift workspace where I kept a dusty laptop, a stack of pitch decks, and 3 unopened letters from a government agency I used to consult for. I wasn't ready to look at them. Not yet. One afternoon, I overheard Evelyn on the phone, her voice low but urgent. "Yes, she signed it last spring. Madison Clark, Social Security ending in 1142. Just refile under the philanthropic trust. No red flags that way." Something froze inside me. That was my SSN. I hadn't signed anything this year, only vague forms last year when they asked for charity compliance. The next morning, I searched the locked drawer in Nathan's home office. The key was in his watch box. I wasn't proud of how easily I found it. Inside, a folder stamped, "Fractional Trust Transfer M. Clark." Every line of that document carried my signature. Except, the signature wasn't mine. I didn't confront anyone. I needed air, space, a different voice. That's when I wandered behind the courthouse after running errands. I had a half-soggy turkey sandwich from a cafe and saw a woman huddled near the dumpster, sorting receipts like they were currency. I offered her the sandwich. She looked up slowly, scanning me. No gratitude, no performative thankfulness, just scrutiny. "You don't belong with them," she said. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" She shook her head. "Never mind, you just looked starved, not for food." It was the first human conversation I'd had in weeks that didn't feel pre-scripted. I sat beside her, ignoring the discomfort of the concrete curb. We didn't exchange names. She asked if I had ever erased my own name from something I built. I said yes, too many times to count. We shared that sandwich in silence, like a contract sealed without ink. Later that evening, Nathan commented on how quiet I was. Evelyn asked if I'd been to a therapist lately. I smiled, said nothing, and replayed that woman's words in my head. "You just looked starved, not for food." She saw something the Clarks never would. My absence, not as weakness, but as warning. 2 days later, she returned. I was leaving the grocery store when I saw her across the parking lot. She was cleaner now, still worn but different. composed. "You left your truth behind," she said. Before I could ask what that meant, she handed me a flash drive wrapped in a napkin from the cafe where I bought that sandwich. "They're laundering money through your name," she added. "You want proof?" Then she disappeared into the sun glare. I held the drive like it might detonate. Something inside me cracked, not from fear, but from the sharpness of recognition. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the distance, the silence, the fraud wrapped in affection. I went home, logged into an old laptop I hadn't used since my startup days, inserted the drive. It buzzed once, then opened a folder labeled "For MC." Inside, spreadsheets, scanned documents, and a hidden video file titled Red Tide Recordings, watching 2019. I clicked play. The video opened with grainy surveillance footage, no timestamp, no sound. Just a dimly lit conference room and 3 men hunched over a laptop, pointing at spreadsheets. One of them was Nathan. I froze. His profile was unmistakable, the slope of his shoulders, the nervous tick in his left thumb when he processed numbers. He was speaking to the others, gesturing toward a document on screen. A woman's hand briefly entered the frame, dropping a folder on the table. Then the screen went black. I opened the Excel files. The names were coded, Shell Company A to J, but one line in bold stood out: primary registration, Madison E. Clark, SSN ending 1142. I didn't register the panic immediately. It came slow, like cold leaking into bones. I clicked deeper. 3 companies, all registered under my name, all linked to addresses I had never lived at, all funneling property transactions from offshore accounts: Cyprus, Belize, Singapore. The math wasn't subtle. It was a crime scene dressed in pivot tables. I called the number Angela left in the folder. No answer. I didn't expect one. But 30 minutes later, someone knocked at the garage door. Angela stood there in a navy coat 2 sizes too big and hair pulled into a neat bun. Her face had more color now. Her eyes were still sharp. "You looked," she said, stepping in without invitation. "Angela," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if that was even her real name. "That's not my name," she replied. "But let's go with it. Keeps things clean." She set a portable hard drive on my workbench and pulled out a notebook bound in leather. "This is everything that got me fired, and this," she tapped the drive, "is what got me erased." Erased? I used to run internal audits for a firm your husband now owns under a proxy name. They asked me to alter records for high-yield real estate exchanges. When I refused, 2 days later, my badge stopped working. My apartment lease was mysteriously terminated. My severance package vanished. I didn't interrupt. I couldn't. They wiped me out, and they used you, your ID, your background, your clean history, to front 3 laundering circuits, all through crypto-backed real estate flips. They didn't even bother hiding it well. Why would they? You were sleeping in their house. "How do you know all this?" She smirked. "Because I set up the original encryption system. I built it. Before they turned it into a laundering machine." I sat down, my legs no longer supporting me. "They used me." "They hollowed you out," she corrected, "and no one even noticed." I stared at the hard drive. The folder marked Red Tide. Recordings 2019 wasn't just an archive. It was her testimony, her scream into a void. She had tried to report it, maybe even stop it. And now she lived behind dumpsters while the Clark estate served caviar at brunch. I began cross-checking the LLC filings. Each company name followed a pattern: 3 initials, always ending in E. Madison E. Clark. My middle name was their breadcrumb trail. One address used in a property flip was located in Colorado Springs. I had never been there, but the transaction occurred 3 days after I had signed a gift deed for the Clark Family Trust, something Evelyn asked me to sign for tax purposes. I ran an IP lookup on the login associated with that transaction. The result? Masked by a VPN, geolocated to a blockchain node in Estonia. But the last unmasked session, Denver, Clark residence, 2 months ago, 3:12 a.m. Nathan had been up late that night, preparing for a presentation. He even asked me to make tea. Angela watched me put the pieces together. She didn't rush. She knew the wait needed time. "You're not crazy," she said softly. "You were engineered to doubt yourself. That's how this works." I met her eyes. "Why now? Why help me?" She hesitated. "Because I saw what they did to you. I know what it's like to be buried while still breathing. And you're the one person who can hurt them without becoming them." I opened the folder again. My name stared back at me from fake deeds, tax filings, offshore transfers. Angela tapped the edge of the desk. "You have options. Go to the IRS. Go to a journalist or, I asked, go to war, quietly. Let them think they still own you while you carve out their spine." I didn't answer. Not yet. But deep inside, something shifted. The grief, the humiliation, the quiet compliance. They calcified into something sharper. Not revenge, not yet. But the beginning of knowing I wasn't just their collateral damage. I was their liability. My marriage had never felt more like a contract, and now I had the fine print. I spent 3 days pretending to be the same Madison who floated through brunches, nodded politely at Evelyn's passive-aggressive compliments, and kissed Nathan goodnight like nothing inside me had shattered. But behind that practiced smile, I was building a case. I set up encrypted backups of the files Angela gave me. I mirrored data across 2 air-gapped drives and stored one in a locker at a gym I hadn't visited in 2 years. Then I dug into every bank account Nathan and I had ever shared. Transaction by transaction, I built a parallel ledger, comparing balances, timestamps, file references, and IP data from the metadata in Angela's drive. The math aligned with unnerving precision. Every time I paid a utility bill or transferred a grocery budget, their shell corporations mirrored the movement with larger sums. My financial presence had been their smokescreen. My normalcy was their camouflage. The most damning pattern involved a dummy account listed as Clark Women's Wellness Fund, supposedly for the philanthropic foundation Evelyn ran. The routing number linked it to an offshore intermediary in the Cayman Islands. The account owner, Madison E. Clark. I tracked the tax filings associated with the fund. Each submission listed my social security number, filed electronically, time-stamped 3:42 a.m., on a day I was heavily sedated after my D&C procedure. They'd waited until I was unconscious to build an empire in my name. The sickness in my stomach gave way to something colder, focused. I needed more than paper trails. I needed undeniable real-time proof, something no one could spin or redact. So I bugged Nathan. It was easier than I imagined. He'd recently gifted me a smart bracelet to track my sleep, which was code for, make sure you're not having another depressive episode. I embedded a micro recorder into its magnetic clasp and synced it with a hidden app. Over the next week, I captured 15 hours of audio. Most was useless. Calls with architects, casual banter, a few offhand mentions of client risk structures. Then one evening, I caught a thread that chilled me. Run it through the Clark Trust. If Madison's still the registered principal, audit flags won't trigger. Her score's clean. That voice belonged to Evelyn. I slowed the audio, isolated the background hum. She was in her office, which meant the recording aligned with the night she'd asked me to bring her chamomile tea. The same night, I saw her shred documents labeled Q4 Crypto Transfer. Evelyn Clark had once worked for the Office of Inspector General, Federal Audit Division. She'd retired early, citing family restructuring. Now I understood why. She hadn't left the system. She'd reverse engineered it. I printed transcripts, labeled files, and encrypted everything again. Then I made a decision. The next morning, I called the IRS Whistleblower Division. They didn't answer directly, of course. There were layers of encryption and verification before I could even leave a message. But within 48 hours, I was contacted by a compliance officer under a burner alias Mr. H. We spoke through secure chat. I uploaded the first batch of documentation. He responded with one line. Your data meets preliminary threshold. We require a live trigger. A trigger? You want me to bait them, I typed. We need visual and verbal confirmation of the fraud's operability. Audio isn't enough. Your family's legal insulation is dense. You have access. Use it. I logged off, shaking. Angela arrived later that evening. I didn't have to explain. She saw the look in my eyes. They want you to set the match, she said, and make sure the camera sees you strike it. I nodded. There's a board meeting next Thursday. Investors, family, partners. That's your window, she said. But they'll sense hesitation. You'll need a script, a backdoor trigger, and a fail-safe. We rehearsed for hours. Angela became my coach, my interrogator, my mirror. She taught me how to deflect questions, how to sound naive without appearing incompetent. We mapped out likely topics, development schedules, donor funnels, foreign asset allocation. If Evelyn brings up the crypto fund, steer her into confirming your role. Ask dumb questions. Let her fill in the gaps, Angela said. Arrogance is her weakness. She'll show off. We also prepped an escape clause. I'd wear a pendant with a wireless transmitter. If activated, it would push a 5-minute audio loop directly to a secure server. Angela even gave me a line to use if things went south. I'm not the Madison you built anymore. By the time Thursday came, I was ready. Or as ready as someone can be to detonate their life in public. The Clark conference room was sleek, modern, cold. Evelyn sat at the head of the table, flanked by Nathan and 2 investment partners. A slide deck displayed quarterly growth. Phrases like vertical integration and smart market positioning floated through the air. Then came the crypto segment. Thanks to our quiet asset partners, Evelyn said, we've streamlined offshore revenue capture. Madison's registration has been invaluable. She glanced at me like a proud mentor. I tilted my head. Sorry, my registration? You mean the Women's Wellness Fund? Nathan stiffened. Evelyn smiled. Of course. You signed the 1142 rollover, the compliance form. It gave us clean entry. Right, I said. I just forget. Was that the same one linked to the Belize wire or the Singapore crypto routing? Silence. Nathan coughed. Evelyn's smile thinned. Both. I nodded slowly, careful to breathe, careful to blink. I tapped my necklace twice. Somewhere in the cloud, Angela's fail-safe was already uploading. The moment Evelyn confirmed the offshore routing, I smiled. Not too wide, just enough to look grateful. I leaned back in my chair as if I hadn't just triggered the upload of damning evidence to both the IRS and 3 encrypted journalist inboxes. The meeting continued. Nathan redirected the conversation, guiding the investors through projections for the Clark family wellness subsidiaries. But the air had shifted. A few glances lingered longer. One man checked his phone twice during Evelyn's pitch. No one said it aloud, but something had cracked. I stayed silent. I let the silence speak for me. When the meeting adjourned, I stepped into the hallway and exhaled hard. Angela had taught me to never exhale in the room. It gave too much away. I walked down to the garden, pretending to check emails. In truth, I was watching the drive count climb on a private server. 2 views. 5. 9. Then a new notification. Whistledoc.org. New file verified. 2. One job eBay. Clark Foundation. Packet. Sender, Madison, Ozwam 42. It was out there. Irretrievable. Unstoppable. But something unexpected happened 30 minutes later. My phone buzzed with a notification from social media. I rarely used it, but the message caught my eye. You're trending. Confused, I clicked. A live stream video had gone viral, over 300,000 views and climbing. It showed a low-angle recording from under the boardroom table, angled just enough to catch Evelyn's face as she said the words, "Madison's registration has been invaluable." The caption read, "My sister-in-law is either the stupidest woman alive or FBI. Guess which?" It was posted by Harper Clark, Nathan's younger sister. She had always been chaotic, unreliable, a socialite with a history of embarrassing tabloid cameos. But today, she'd become my wild card. The comments exploded. "This sounds like a shell game. Wait, Madison didn't even know she was listed?" Whistleblower alert. "IRS, are you watching?" They were. I knew that for certain. That night, Nathan found me in the kitchen, pouring tea with steadier hands than I expected. He looked rattled. "Why didn't you tell me you were recording the meeting?" he asked. I turned slowly. "I wasn't." His jaw twitched. "Then who?" "Your sister, apparently." He didn't speak for a moment, then quieter. "This could ruin everything." I sipped my tea. Maybe it should. That silence stretched between us like a chasm, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to bridge it. Later that night, I wrote a post. It wasn't long, just a simple message, paired with a link to WhistleDoc. My name is Madison Clark. I was unknowingly used as a proxy in a financial laundering network orchestrated by my husband and his family. I have submitted all evidence to federal authorities. I will not be silenced. Within an hour, it was shared over 20,000 times. Reporters called, friends texted, strangers emailed offers of support. I ignored all of them, except one message from an unknown address. "We remember you. Good work. FPA." I stared at the initials. FPA, Federal Procurement Audit. I hadn't seen that acronym since the day I resigned. No one in Nathan's family knew the real reason I left my government job. They assumed it was the miscarriage, but it wasn't. 2 years earlier, I had led a covert forensic audit for the FPA, uncovering fraud in a medical defense contract. The case had rattled high-profile donors tied to Nathan's father's law firm. The pressure was relentless. Nathan had pleaded with me to walk away for our future. He'd convinced me that I was losing perspective, that I was obsessed. He called it burnout. I called it betrayal. I left the agency, I buried the files, and I told myself I could build something meaningful through a startup. Instead, I built nothing. Or so I thought. But now it was all coming back. My credentials, my instincts, my edge. Not as a wife, not as a widow, but as a woman who could take apart a financial empire blindfolded and backward. I met Angela the next morning in a cafe downtown. She wore sunglasses and a scarf, but I could tell she'd seen the live stream. "You're a bit of a legend now," she said, sipping black coffee. "Not the kind I wanted to be." She shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You're visible. That's a kind of armor." "I don't know what happens next," I admitted. "You don't have to. Just don't flinch. They'll come after you, first legally, then reputationally, then financially." "And you?" Angela smiled. "I've been erased once. Harder to do it again." She handed me a new drive. "This has the original internal compliance training files. It proves Evelyn knew exactly what she was doing." "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because you've stopped asking permission. That's the moment someone becomes dangerous." I left the cafe feeling something I hadn't felt in years, alignment, as if the broken parts of my identity had finally fused into something stronger. I wasn't a whistleblower out of vengeance. I was a woman reclaiming her own name. The hammer fell fast. Within 72 hours of my evidence going public, the Department of Justice issued an inquiry into the Clark Foundation's offshore operations. By the end of the week, IRS agents had executed a civil asset forfeiture on all Clark family business accounts. The mansion I once wandered through like a ghost was now frozen property. Evelyn's face appeared on every major network, sometimes framed as a mastermind, sometimes as a misunderstood matriarch. Nathan, to his credit, went silent. His lawyer issued a bland statement about cooperation and clarifying misunderstandings. Harper, ironically, gained 400,000 new followers overnight for her accidental activism. But for me, the world split into two kinds of people. There were those who messaged me with words like brave, badass, and hero. And then there were the others, the ones who flooded my inbox with venom. Why didn't you just leave him? You lived off their money for years, didn't you? Typical woman, playing victim when convenient. No one mentioned the miscarriage. No one asked what it felt like to be turned into a financial corpse and reanimated as someone's liability shield. And yet, I didn't regret exposing the truth. Not for a second. The system had trained me to be silent, grateful, docile. I had unlearned that instinct with fire. But what I didn't expect was the cost paid by others. Angela stopped replying to messages 3 days after the viral post. I assumed she was laying low, staying safe. Then a burner number called me at 2:13 a.m. I answered on instinct. Heavy breathing, then a muffled voice. She didn't scream. Click. I tried the number again. Disconnected. I emailed Angela, pinged her burner, checked all 3 encrypted channels we used. Nothing. By noon, her storage locker was cleaned out. Her name was no longer on the NGO registry she had shown me. The cafe we'd met in said they hadn't seen her in over a week, even though she'd been there 48 hours earlier. I filed a missing persons report, but I knew what this was. This wasn't coincidence. This was retaliation. Someone had removed her, and they were warning me. Stay in your lane or follow. I didn't panic. I calculated. Angela had always said, truth without pressure is just confession. You need leverage. So I traced hers. I went back into her encrypted archives, every file she'd shared, every lead she'd hinted at but never opened. And in one folder titled Red Wire Recovery, I found a contact labeled Sen DC Confirmed Handler. It took me less than 10 minutes to cross-reference Senate Finance Committee rosters and campaign donors linked to the Clark Trust. One name stood out, Senator Malcolm Darren. Publicly, he was a centrist reformer, a flag-waving moderate with a clean record and an aversion to lobbyists. Privately, he had accepted 6 figures in consulting donations, routed through 3 of the companies listed in Angela's files, and every single one of those companies was listed under my name. I stared at the page. This wasn't just about tax evasion or shell games anymore. This was political infrastructure laundering, using nonprofit fronts to redirect dark money into clean influence. I requested a Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, pull on Senator Darren's closed ethics reviews. One had been filed 5 years earlier by an anonymous insider in the Inspector General's office. It was dismissed due to insufficient cause. The submitter's internal ID? EC4821 Evelyn Clark. It hit me like a punch to the gut. My mother-in-law had once been the whistleblower, and somewhere between that moment and now, she had changed sides. I dug deeper. Evelyn's early retirement from the OIG had been abrupt, filed just months after the anonymous ethics complaint. 2 years later, she was on the board of Clark Family Holdings, quietly restructuring its legal framework to accommodate international holdings. She hadn't just looked away. She had turned traitor. But why? Then I saw it. A sealed custody file from the year Nathan turned 15, connected to a closed case involving fraud allegations against his biological father. The man had been under investigation for securities manipulation. The charges vanished. So did the father. Rumors claimed he died in a boating accident. No confirmation was ever released. I called in a favor from an old colleague at the FPA. She owed me for a defense contract leak I had buried in 2018. She called back at midnight. Madison, she said, you're not going to like this. Darren and Nathan's father, same man, different identities. He faked the death, changed the name, got a clean record. I sat there, breath gone. Senator Malcolm Darren wasn't just the Clark family's puppet master. He was Nathan's father, which meant Evelyn hadn't switched sides. She'd never left them. She had gone undercover for the FBI. She'd found her ex-husband embedded in the political elite. And when push came to shove, she made a choice, not for justice, but for blood. She aligned with the very man she once tried to destroy, to protect Nathan, to give him power, to build an empire from their sins. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made tea, because when everything's on fire, you learn to sip between explosions. The next morning, I published a dossier. No narrative, no emotion, just facts, connections, timelines, wire transfers, bloodlines. I included a line at the end. They didn't just steal money, they rewrote blood. It caught flame in hours. Political analysts, former OIG agents, financial journalists. Everyone jumped. Senator Darren issued a denial, then a statement, then went off the grid. Nathan left me a voicemail I never opened. Evelyn, though. She sent a handwritten note. I warned you not to dig, but even you don't know how deep this goes. You think this was about your name. It never was. It was about who controls the ledger, and it's never the name on the line. It's the hand holding the pen. I folded the letter and placed it in my safe. Angela was still missing, but I was no longer afraid. The aftershock had arrived, and I was still standing. I named the website ledgerlight.org. Simple. Stark. It opened with a single sentence. They counted on silence. This is what it costs to speak. Below it, files unfolded like chapters in a buried book. Bank statements, contracts, offshore filings, audio clips, email threads, and scanned documents linking 4 dummy corporations across 3 continents. Each page came with a footnote, dates, parties involved, and a brief summary of how each transaction worked. It wasn't just exposure, it was a map. A path through every lie they built, stone by stone on my name. I didn't outsource the editing. I stayed up through the night formatting documents, adding redactions where necessary to protect low-level employees, annotating certain clips for clarity. I wanted the world to understand not just what they did, but how quiet it looked, how clean it sounded. The site launched at 6:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. By noon, it had 1 million views. By Wednesday, major media outlets started quoting it. By Friday, the IRS issued a statement. The source known as Madison Clark provided key, verifiable evidence instrumental in exposing an international laundering network operating through nonprofit corporate fronts. We recognize her as the central whistleblower in the Clark Holdings investigation. They didn't call me a hero. They called me a source. That suited me fine. Angela returned the following Sunday. She appeared in my backyard just before dawn, wearing a windbreaker and aviator sunglasses, sipping gas station coffee like it was vintage wine. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, smirking. I thought I had. The witness protection people are better than I expected, she added, sitting down beside me. Except for the food, no salt, and a lot of pasta. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't need to. Her presence said enough. We sat in silence for a long time, just the birds and the occasional siren in the distance. Then she reached into her coat and handed me a folded piece of paper, a name, a bank account, a shell company I hadn't discovered. You missed one, she said. I laughed. Guess I'm losing my touch. Or maybe you were never meant to do this alone. She stayed for 2 days, helped me close the final loop, gave a private interview to a nonprofit media collective that documented systemic fraud. Then she disappeared again, this time with no fear in her eyes. Only peace. I didn't return to the government. I didn't rebuild my startup. I didn't take the consulting offers or the lucrative speaking engagements that flooded my inbox for weeks. Instead, I formed something new. Women Against Corporate Abuse. Not just a movement, a mechanism. We started with 6 volunteers, former accountants, compliance officers, and whistleblowers who had been silenced, fired, or buried by NDAs. Within a month, we had 24 more, then 50. Then a waiting list. We offered legal protection, media strategy, and digital forensics. We gave women the tools to expose fraud without destroying their lives in the process. We didn't ask for gratitude, only truth. And I didn't do it for redemption. I did it because when the system turns you into a ghost, the only way back is to haunt the people who wrote you off. Our office was modest, 2 floors above a bakery in Denver. No security detail, no marble lobby, just women at laptops, tracing money, redacting documents, unearthing corruption with the same precision that once buried them. One morning, Harper, yes, Harper, showed up. She wore sunglasses and an oversized hoodie like she thought it would disguise her. It didn't. "I have something," she said, "about a PAC fund Dad set up through a fake grant initiative. It's in my name." "Why tell me?" "Because I'm tired of being funny. I want to be dangerous." I nodded. "You came to the right place." We made her a desk the same day. I kept Evelyn's letter in my desk drawer. Sometimes I reread it, not for insight, but for proof of how scared they'd been, of how much they knew I could do, and I could still hear her last line. "It's never the name on the line. It's the hand holding the pen." She was right, so I became the hand. I never returned to the Clark mansion, never stepped foot inside their estate again, but I watched it from a distance, the way you watch a building crumble in slow motion, bittersweet but necessary. Nathan left the country. Evelyn lost her advisory seat in 2 boards. Senator Darren resigned. Their empire didn't explode, it eroded, bit by bit, lie by lie, until all that remained were the ruins I chose not to walk through. 6 months later, I gave my first public talk, not as a victim, not as a warning, as a builder. I stood in front of a room full of women who thought they were alone, who thought no one would believe them, who thought no one would come back for them. I told them I shared a sandwich once, and it cost me everything, and gave me more than I ever thought possible. When the applause faded, someone asked if I had any regrets. I said no. I only had one thing left to say. They called me a liability, a burden, a debt. Now they're paying in full.